I think we can start. So welcome to Webster University of Geneva. We are very glad to welcome to our campus Rear Admiral Upper Half Fabio Agostini, an Italian Navy flag officer, who recently commanded the European Naval Force in the Mediterranean operation IRINI, and before IRINI for about 40-45 days also Operation Sophia. Admiral Agostini graduated in Maritime and Naval Sciences at the University of Pisa and holds a master's degree in Defense Studies from the King's College in London. In '97, he attended the 20th Navy Staff College course at the Istituto di Guerra Marittima in Lecco, the War College. And in 2004, Admiral Agostini was selected for the Joint Services Command and Staff course at the UK Defence Academy in Stevenage. In 2009, he completed the legal advisor course at the Center for Advanced Defence Studies in Rome, and he attended the Common Security and Defence Policy Orientation and Advanced course at the NATO Orientation course. He also attended a master's degree course and completed it in Public and Institutional Communication and a master's degree in Leadership, Change Management and Digital Innovation in 2020. Admiral Agostini is an expert in international humanitarian law, institutional and international relations and communication, and is the author of several articles and essays on international organizations, maritime piracy and terrorism, the law of armed conflicts at sea, and institutional communications. He lectured at several civilian and military organizations and organized several seminars and conferences at universities and research centers. Among the many awards and decorations he received, we can list the Knight of the Military Order of Italy, the Silver Medal of Merit of the Italian Red Cross, the Civil Protection Medal of Public Merit, the Golden Cross for Seniority Service, the Silver Medal of Honor for Long Navigation, the Mauritian Medal of Merit for 50 years of military career. Tonight, Admiral Agostini will talk about the Mediterranean Sea International Security Operation IRINI and beyond. Welcome, Admiral Agostini. The floor is yours, or better, the podium. I will share again the screen here. Let's share the screen. This one, yes, or this one. I think that one, yeah. Voila. Okay.
So thank you very much for this introduction. Let me first of all thank Professor Fabiani, my dear friend Oreste, the Webster University and also its management for inviting me here today. Thanks also to all distinguished guests that here and in online are here to listen to my experience as a commander of Operation UNAVFOR MED IRINI. In the next 30 minutes or so, I will describe the achievements and lessons learned from the operation that I have the honor to guide. Let's see if it does. I think it's blocked. Don't ask me why. Okay, we try. It doesn't matter. I can try even with this. Don't worry. Perfect. So I would split my speech into four parts. The first, more general, about the strategic context. The second, regarding the characteristic of the UNAVFOR MED IRINI. The third, about the results obtained since October 2021. In the fourth part, I will draw some conclusion and lessons. I will start by providing a bit of useful background information on Mediterranean context. Looking briefly at the political background, it becomes clear that despite the establishment of a new government of national unity, the long-lasting lack of fully effective state institution in Libya has implied the new proliferation of illicit activity, including human and armed trafficking, oil smuggling, and terrorism. Tripolitania and Cyrenaica are still backed by several international supporters, military as well as politically. The security situation in Libya, but also in all Mediterranean Sea, remain fragile. For Europe and most of the international community, there is the need to enable Libyan security ownership through stabilization and capacity building. This situation has taken on an ever more complex connotation due to the COVID pandemic that has afflicted both Europe and the whole Mediterranean area. It is clear that the strategic context in which Operation IRINI is moving is certainly a complex crossroads of multinational challenges, but represents at the same time an opportunity for the European Union and the international community to give a relevant contribution to the peace process in Libya. Regardless of what the goals of the different international players involved might be, a stable Libya should be everyone's objective. The big challenge is that not all comply with what was agreed to an international level. Migration flow is still an issue to consider and monitor in IRINI area operation. Flows of migrants from Niger, Chad, Egypt, and Sudan regularly travel to Libya in hope of escaping to Europe to be free of economical turmoil and escalating violence in their own countries. The main routes used by migrants to reach Europe in the first 8 months of 2021 is still the Central Mediterranean route that represent around 70% of all the Mediterranean flow. The number of people departed from Libya increased of the 133%, following the same trend observed in 2020. This can be attributed to a number of factors: the absence of military naval vessels targeting human traffickers with a reduced deterrent effect, the difficulties that the legitimate Libyan authorities have to control the cost due to the COVID pandemic, the lack of training, the corruption, and the lack of means. The condition of detention centers unfit to accommodate too many migrants in a period of COVID-19. Furthermore, due to the coronavirus outbreak, in 2020, the UN has announced the suspension of the pivotal activities that protected over 600,000 migrants in Libya in the past 9 years. Without the help of outside resources, Libyan migrants have been greatly exploited by traffickers and terrorist organizations operating in the region. Finally, it shouldn't be excluded the possible impact of a third state, like Turkey, for example, in Libya, in influencing the migrant flow and the behavior of the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy. The international recognized government of national unity lacks in the necessary resources, training, and sometimes political will to address the exploitation of Libyan's power vacuum by traffickers and terrorists. With the state ungoverned and an excess of unregulated and uncontrolled weapons in Libya, old and new terrorist groups have grown during the conflict, increasing the number of violent players in this fractured state. I will now move briefly on the description of the characteristic of Operation EUNAVFOR MED. After the first Berlin conference, the EU Foreign Affairs Council decided to launch on the 31st of March 2020 a new operation focused on implementing the UN's arms embargo off the coast of Libya and simultaneously close Operation Sophia. On the 10th of September 2020, with the execution of the first boarding activity, I declared the full operation capability. At the beginning of 2021, after the first strategic review, the Council extended of 2 years the mandate of the operation until 31st of March 2023. In June, acknowledging the effective value of the work carried out by IRINI, the UN Security Council extended by 1 year the resolution 2292 that represents IRINI's legal framework for the conduct of offshore inspection on board suspect vessels. On the 23rd of June 2021, the second Berlin Conference on Libya was held with no particular results achieved. In October last year, Libya's warring sides reached a countrywide permanent ceasefire agreement and set a 3-month deadline for withdrawal of foreign troops and mercenaries from the country. The ceasefire agreement remains stable, but the mercenaries and foreign troops are still in the country. In March 2021, despite numerous challenges and skepticism, the negotiation process supported by the UN allowed for the birth of the Government of National Unity, led by Premier Fabio. This executive government was created to meet the primary needs of the Libyan population and to ferry the country to the election, initially scheduled for the 24th of December 2021. But Libyan rival institutions in Tobruk and Tripoli are meanwhile divided over constitutional rules, wrangling that has thrown the December vote into uncertainty. An international conference held on 21st of October in Tripoli aimed to drum up support for the long-awaited election. The talks also seek to find common ground on issues, including withdrawal of foreign forces and mercenaries from Libya. The results were very poor. A new international conference in Libya was held in Paris on the 12th of November 2021, organized by the UN, Germany, Italy, and France, with the aim of ensuring the survival of the new institutional setup that emerged after the end of the fighting between rival militias. The main objective of the conference were to ensure the conduct of the new election and to implement the withdrawal of foreign mercenaries still present in the country. The Libyan authorities have made the commitment to hold election on the 24th of September to confirm the election. The results appear to be again poor due to the absence of the main political leaders of Russia and Turkey. It does not seem that much progress has been made in this way. Moreover, the candidates who have been presented themselves so far, Gaddafi's son, General Haftar, and the president of the parliament of Tobruk, Agila Saleh, do not appear to have the requisites established by the UN to be able to stand in the election. Operation IRINI is now undoubtedly one of the most complex common security and defense policy military operation of the European Union. The political vision provided by the High Representative, Mr. Borrell, at the launching of the operation reflects the holistic approach agreed in the first Berlin Conference. IRINI is a part of a process involving political, military, economic, and humanitarian tracks. IRINI is not the solution of the Libyan crisis. IRINI is an important tool in order to set the condition for diplomacy to work toward a permanent solution to the Libyan crisis. Operation core task is to implement the arms embargo on Libya in accordance with the relevant United Security Council resolutions. The operation will also deliver 3 secondary tasks listed on the slide in support of the security and stability in the wider central Mediterranean region. 4 monthly checks are carried out to verify the absence of a pull factor towards a migrant flow. The operation could finish when the EU military contribution is no longer required to implement the arms embargo and to support the conclusion of the Berlin process for a peaceful solution to the Libyan crisis. Moreover, as a consequence of the strategic review, the end state has been slightly adapted by now, also including the capacity building and training of the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy. The operation can currently count on 4 maritime assets assigned on a continuity base. The Greek frigate Navabinon is now the flagship and hosts the force commander, the Hellenic Force Commander. The operation can also rely on a continuous basis on 1 Italian manned aerial vehicle and 2 maritime patrol and reconnaissance aircraft from Poland and Luxembourg. Other assets are available, but only for few sorties per month. The actual situation, that is a very lucky situation, should not be considered as a normal one. Despite of the minimum number of 5 ships requested in the operation plan, in 2020 and for the first 9 months of 2021, we could count in average only on 2 ships per day. That is absolutely not sufficient to ensure a proper execution of all the mandate tasks in an area of operation which is more or less as big as the UK. Without any doubt, EUTSATCEM, the Satellites European Center, has an important role in achieving the mission objectives thanks to its imagery provision. The current manning sees a maximum of 1,000 people engaged in the operation, with 24 European contributing nations of all armed forces. The variety of personnel demonstrates clearly the real European and joint nature of the operation. In order to effectively deter and prevent potential breach of the arms embargo in accordance with the relevant UN Security Council resolutions, I request a robust package of ROEs, rules of engagement, that was approved by member states. The most important point is the possibility to carry out uncooperative and unopposed boarding. Any boarding must be conducted in accordance with the flag state consent or with the 4 hours of good faith efforts principle. At the same time, there is the possibility to divert vessels suspected of arms trafficking to suitable ports. Finally, yet importantly, we have considered the possibility that a suspect vessel could be escorted by a third party's warship. Whenever a boarding is not possible or authorized, IRINI assets could only provide to the collection of intelligence. About the core task, it's worth to remind that the resolution 2292 of 2016 that authorized offshore inspection and port diversion of suspect embargo breakers has been renewed by the UN Council since June 2022. This was an important step as the resolution represents the basis of the core task of the operation EUNAVFOR MED. It shows the will of the international community to preserve the legal framework aimed at preventing the illicit trafficking of arms to and from Libya in the common effort to bring peace and stability in the country. According to our analysis, the embargo breakers have different pattern of life by sea, air, and land. There is no specific evidence of embargo violation by sea during the last months, let's say during the last 9 months. Moreover, a progressive decrease in the number of suspect flights to and from Libya airports since the achievement of a ceasefire was observed. No violation of the embargo by land routes has been observed. Let's talk about the case of vessel Royal Diamond 7. The vessel departed from United Arab Emirates heading to Benghazi in Libya, Cyrenaica, and carrying a cargo of jet fuel, which the UN and EU classified as military material. IRINI successfully intercepted the vessel, and during the inspection, I managed to analyze the fuel on board and through a private laboratory in Italy. The analysis confirmed the type of fuel, and therefore the vessel was diverted to a Greek port for the seizure of their cargo after the decision of the Political Security Committee. This was the first ever diversion operation conducted by the European Union in its history. The jet fuel is currently seized in Greece, awaiting for the completion of the judiciary activity for further disposal after 1 year. One of the IRINI secondary tasks regards the gathering of information on illicit oil smuggling. IRINI acts in full compliance with the relevant UN Security Council resolution, but IRINI cannot proceed with the boarding of suspect vessel for this case. IRINI can only monitor and report any suspect illicit activity and exert a deterrence effect on oil smugglers. It's important to underline that Libya has the largest African oil field. During the civil war, the reduced legal exploitation of oil paved the way for illicit trafficking. Meanwhile, the production and the legal export of the oil has climbed to 1,300,000 barrels per day, and Libya has managed to steadily increase its output. However, it is predictable that oil smuggling will not stop soon due to the presence of criminal organizations involved in illicit trafficking and to the unbalanced distribution of the legal oil revenues on the Libyan territories. In this context, in May 2020, EUNAVFOR MED intervention prompted the merchant vessel Jan Laxmi, flag of Gabon, to change her intention to conduct an illegal transfer of oil from Tobruk, Libya, to United Arab Emirates, demonstrating an effective deterrence effect. Let's move on another task. IRINI contributes to the dismantling of the migrant smuggling business model by using only aerial assets when available and strongly rely on cooperation with Operation Frontex. The surface assets of IRINI have operated in the eastern part of the area of operation, as you can see on the slide, while the human trafficker passed toward Europe farther to the west. Therefore, since inception, IRINI has never had a measurable effect on the modus operandi of human traffickers and did not produce any pull factor for the departure of migrants both from Libya. It is clear that the most effective way to reduce the migration flow and to dismantle human trafficking is to provide an effective training capacity building program in favor of the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy. Unfortunately, this secondary task is currently frozen, pending the Libyan political agreement. In the first 8 months of 2021, Libyan Navy and Coast Guard rescued nearly 50% of the migrants that departed from Libya, confirming the trend observed in the last 3 years. Some recent events have raised concern regarding respect for human rights when it comes to migrants at sea. In this regard, it is important to note that from the end of 2016 to the end of 2019, the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy, subjected to the training of EUNAVFOR MED Sophia, increased the overall operational capability and show also a substantial improvement in the management of SAR events, search and rescue events, and the treatment of rescue migrants. This last aspect is the result of the importance given to the integration of training modules dedicated to the respect of human rights, gender issue, and protection of vulnerable categories, with each training activity developed by EUNAVFOR MED with the support of member states. I will now move on the results achieved so far. Let me start by summarizing the results with concrete data. Until the end of September, IRINI investigated until the end of October, IRINI investigated about 4,500 merchant ships and carried out 200 friendly approaches that are visits to merchant vessels conducted with the consent of the ship captains. We also monitor over 630 suspect flights, 25 airports, and 16 ports. Until the end of October, IRINI sent 51 inspections requests to the relevant member state police authorities for suspicious merchant vessels approaching European ports. 42 inspections were carried out. 20 ships were completely inspected and one of them was seized, as I described. 6 times, the flag state, in particular Turkey, denied the authorization to board and inspect suspect vessels. Once IRINI operation detects a violation, it acts like a policeman. Through its reporting activity, it notified the competent UN and European bodies violation and possible violations occur within the area of operation. It is up to the UN and EU bodies to follow up on the information IRINI sends and take decision against those that are guilty of violation of UN resolution with sanction, name and blame, and shame. Since the beginning of the operation, up the end of September, IRINI provided 31 special reports to the UN, in particular to the UN panel of experts on Libya, most of them with evidence gathered for both armed trafficking and oil smuggling. The reports refer to both sides of the Libyan conflict. These data unequivocally show how IRINI acts in an impartial and balanced manner. In carrying out its duty, IRINI has established an evident and strong presence in the area of operation, generating a clear deterrent effect on illegal trafficking. In this regard, it is worth noting that since the launch of Operation IRINI, there has been a ceasefire between the conflict parties in Libya. A new government of national unity has been formed and oil production has resumed. To what extent IRINI has contributed to all this is impossible to assess or to measure, but it is a fact and it cannot be just due to chance. These results are precisely the goal that the EU member states set themselves when they agreed to launch Operation IRINI. IRINI is now recognized as a relevant actor and the cooperation with regional stakeholders is improving. Cooperation with US AFRICOM, the United States Command dealing with Africa, restarted just a few days before I finished my duty as Operation Commander. And that happened after my visit to the US at the end of July. I met a representative of the Department of Defense as well as the Department of State to make them more familiar with IRINI tasks and achievements. The stall related to agreement with NATO remain, unfortunately, to be solved. IRINI still does not have an agreement with NATO as it was for Operation Sophia. The agreement would have positive consequences for both sides. It would allow IRINI to access to valuable tactical information in order to be even more balanced and impartial. So, on a NATO perspective, the exchange of information could provide a better regional balance. Additionally, it would permit the most critical members of the alliance to verify how impartial IRINI is actually working. One of the most significant cooperation is with the international shipping community. IRINI is now perceived as a security provider in the area. A safer Mediterranean Sea and the peace in Libya would have a significant effect on the economy of the whole region, as shown by a recent study of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission from Western Africa. According to this study, the peace in Libya would give the region's economies a boost of $162 billion by 2025. Despite the pandemic, we also conducted an extensive outreach activity and an intensive key leaders engagement. Starting from my first meeting with the Political Security Committee, I have stressed the fact that strategic communication represents an essential part to achieve the operational, political, and military objectives. Since the beginning of the operation, we developed a number of communication activities on traditional media, social media, conferences, lessons, and website engaging several stakeholders, enhancing the knowledge of IRINI activities, tasks, and achievement. This operational communication was structured in a communication plan prepared by the OHQ Media Cell as a part of the overall EU strategic communication in support of Operation IRINI. But this could not be enough. During this period, we had to face a number of fake news, adversary narrative, misinformation, and strong attack via media. It was difficult to deal with such a situation with just the command capability. At the time, the High Representative's statement support our position, and his visit to the OHQ in Rome last March contributed enormously to improve our visibility and the understanding by the international community of IRINI's role. Finally, after more than 1 year since the launch of the operation, the EU member states have approved a long-awaited document on IRINI information communication strategy. Now, the EU institutions and member states have an adequate and well-crafted document and are invited to more actively support IRINI's effort to tackle aggressive propaganda and fake news attack. So, let's move on some final consideration and most relevant lesson to take from IRINI experience. The fragile situation and the challenging political stalemate in Libya highlight the need for continued maritime security presence in the central Mediterranean, an area where a number of actors are increasing their footprint to fulfill their own national interests. Libya dynamics are deeply influenced by external players. The multiple internal and external interferences and interests make the Libyan scenario extremely complex and difficult to be properly addressed by an international community. Enduring lack of effective state institutions in Libya leads to continued proliferation of illicit activities, and then to the need to enable Libyan security ownership with stabilization and capacity building. IRINI is the only international actor that is implementing the UN's arms embargo on Libya in full compliance with and within the boundaries of relevant UN Security Council resolution of the international law, as well as in accordance with the rules of engagement approved by member states. Some countries are using these boundaries to sabotage the embargo itself by denying the flag state consent. In more than 18 months of activity, in spite of a lot of difficulties, also due to the COVID pandemic, Operation IRINI demonstrated its effectiveness and impartiality in implementing the UN's arms embargo. However, it could fulfill its task even better if more assets, personnel, and intelligence are provided. IRINI has developed solid experience and demonstrated that is able to exercise a strong leadership in the central Mediterranean Sea and has become a credible and reliable actor being perceived as a real maritime security provider. Outreach and key leader engagement towards key stakeholders is decisive. It has led to the international community to be more aware of the EU's presence and assertiveness in the Mediterranean Sea in favor of the peace process in Libya. I remain skeptical regarding the possibility to restart soon cooperation with NATO due to political difficulties between EU and non-EU allies. Migration flow is still an issue to consider and monitor in the area of operation, but IRINI does not constitute a pull factor. The most effective way of disrupting human smuggling business model is by enhancing the capability of the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy. The problem regarding the respect of human rights might be a consequence of the long-lasting suspension of UNAVFOR MED training and that other players have been training the Libyan Coast Guard Navy now. There is still the need to enable Libyan security ownership through stabilization and capacity building. EU is able to implement a fully effective integrated approach in support of the Libyan peace process, but all EU member states should enhance their effort and harmonize all initiatives to overcome the current political stall with the Libyan authorities. A robust STRATCOM is an important element for the operation to deter those involved in illicit activities. The operational communication from the OHQ alone is not sufficient to deal with a strong and organized adversary communication campaign. The new EU STRATCOM could better support IRINI efforts to face aggressive propaganda and fake news attack. This will help to spread some messages about IRINI and EU impartial contribution to Libya's stability and to take aggressive propaganda and fake news attacks. The EU institution and member states have a fundamental role in supporting IRINI effort to this communication campaign. To conclude my speech, allow me to emphasize one aspect that is very important in my view. In the last period, following the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the debate on European defense has gained more impetus. One of the difficulties that have stood in the way of genuine European defense has been the lack of unanimity in decision-making on matters concerning the common security and defense policy. With Operation IRINI, the EU member states unanimously and promptly decide to launch an operation that is very complex and articulated both politically and operationally. This was possible because the operation immediately had a clear objectives, unambiguous task, and well-defined end state. IRINI is therefore a demonstration that agreement can be reached between the member states by mediating between the national interests of individuals and those of the European Union as a whole, when it comes to acting to safeguard the main security interests in the area of Europe's borders. I therefore believe that the European Union can build on the IRINI experience, which, if properly analyzed, could represent the true embryo of the future European defense. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm still ready to reply to your question, if any. Thanks a lot.
Admiral, we can now open to the floor. And checking. Stop sharing. Okay, I don't have to admit other participants. There are 24 people online, so probably we can take a seat now.
Okay.
You can reply to the question.
And they hear us from here?
Yes, so there is the.
Okay, perfect.
The room. Please.
For all of the ships that have been either detained or otherwise noticed to be suspect of smuggling of some sort, has there been further investigation into the backgrounds of those ships? Or has it been more of a response to potential threats and then going from there?
Well, every time we detect a suspect ship and we board it, or we just monitor it, there is a complex process of intelligence and sharing information with all the international community engaged in maritime traffic. And so in any case, the study of a particular kind of ship will not stop with an action, but will continue. And let me say that start even before the ship is transiting in the area of operation, because as soon as the ship entered the area of operation, we already have all the information that are needed to decide to board it or not, or to leave it go for that moment. You're welcome.
You stressed quite some time, a few times, the fact that the operation really doesn't constitute a pull factor. Are you remarking this because Operation Sophia was different in this regard, or
no? No, I don't think that even Operation Sophia constitute a pull factor. This is my personal opinion, of course. The fact is that in particular for Operation IRINI, this was requested during the approval of the plan. Operation IRINI should not constitute a pull factor, and that's why the member states in the Political Security Committee every 4 months renew the agreement to keep the ship at sea. Maybe you remember that in the last year of Operation Sophia, the ship were withdrawn from the sea because some countries believe that they could constitute a pull factor. So now to launch a new operation, it was necessary to assure all the member states that IRINI could not constitute a pull factor, and that a continuous check on this issue is to be made from the operation, but also from Europe in itself. But it's not a problem, believe me. We have a reasonable ground to say that there is no pull factor from IRINI.
Other question from the floor?
And what's your feeling, if any, about the European Union political willingness to pursue this way, to continue to go on investing on these operations or sea operations?
Well, let me say, as I conclude my briefing, say that the European Union, from my perspective, should invest on IRINI because it's a real example of European defense. For a number of reasons that some of them I had the opportunity to describe, but there are a lot of different issues that could be considered to think to IRINI as a real European defense example. But in any case, the EU member states demonstrate their willingness, the political willingness, not only at the launch of the operation, but also at the renewal of the operation for other 2 years. So that really constitutes an important step. Without the political will, the operation could not last since 2023 so far.
I have one question about the assets. So it is my opinion that according to me, the operation is not understaffed maybe, but probably it lacks of the necessary assets at sea and in the air. What is your opinion?
Well, this is absolutely true. I would always stress the fact that together with the political will, there should be even the military will, even the will to give assets. And this is a little bit more difficult. All the European armed forces are stressed by a lot of missions, operations all over the world. Of course, as operational commander, I would like even more assets. The actual situation is quite good with 4 ships, but I had to deal with 2 ships per day for 1 year and a half. So this is not absolutely enough. It's not enough to be impartial and balanced. If you have 2 ships and if you are at north, you cannot be at south. If you are east, you cannot be at west. So the kind of trafficking, illicit trafficking that are present in the area can come from everywhere. And you cannot be balanced and impartial if you have only few assets available.
As my students know, I'm a big supporter of mixed civilian and military operations, and IRINI and before IRINI Sophia are 2 examples, of course, with pros and cons. The area that you have to control during both Sophia and IRINI was huge, still is huge. And I think that without the necessary assets at sea and in the air for air reconnaissance, it's very difficult. But deep in my heart, I believe that there is also a hypocrite attitude of the European Union, because IRINI might become, or Sophia before IRINI, a sort of useful scapegoat, because when the public opinion asks Brussels, I mean the EU, what are you doing for the global migration crisis? But we're doing a lot. For example, there is IRINI, there is Sophia. So in the end, they revert to Sophia, they revert to IRINI, but because they are understaffed and under, let's say, equipped with the right assets, it becomes a hard task for an operation commander and for the whole operation to fulfill the mandate. That's why I think it's a scapegoat for me.
Well, I don't know really if it was true for Sophia. Let me say that IRINI, as I underlined during my presentation, IRINI is not the solution, cannot be the solution, and IRINI is a part of the solution together with other tracks. There is the economic, social, and cultural, but also military track to solve the Libyan crisis. I think that Europe could do more, but is doing enough. At the moment, Libya is doing enough, at least to put pressure on the international community to reach an important step, an important objective, that is the election by the end of this year. This, for me, and I think also for a lot of Libyans, it's a fundamental step in the future of Libya. The Libyans want election, and Europe is supporting politically, but also economically, to help Libya to reach this goal.
Thank you. Other question?
Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with the current crisis in Libya. Would you be willing to share the basic facts of what's going on in Libya?
Yeah, during the last 2 years and a half, the beginning, well, let's start from a little bit far. After the fall of Gaddafi regime, the situation in Libya become very difficult to manage, and it started a very deep civilian crisis. At the end of the day, there were 2 big functions in 2 different areas, Cyrenaica and Tripolitania, and a government of national authority recognized by the UN was established in Tripoli. On the other side, the Libyan parliament was established in Tobruk. Both of them are backed by very powerful armed forces, and that start to fight together. And for a certain point, the Cyrenaica forces seems to be more well-equipped and, let's say, stronger than the Tripolitanian one. Maybe even because, as the international community knows, because the Cyrenaica forces at the beginning were helped by Russian forces, maybe not officially, but these with this, let's say, armed group, for example, Wagner. When the Cyrenaica forces started to seize Tripoli, they arrived more or less 20 kilometers from the center of Tripoli, and the Government of National Unity asked for the help of the international community in general, but specifically Turkey agreed to help the Government of National Unity and help politically, but also militarily. And then after the intervention of Turkey in Tripolitania, the Cyrenaica forces were forced to go back, and now there is a ceasefire between the two sides on the line, a virtual line that goes from Sirte to the airport of Al Jufra. That ceasefire agreement lasts since October last year. In the international community, the UN, but even the two sides are agreed on the possibility to have the formal election, presidential and parliamentary election on the 24th of this year. Unfortunately, there are still some differences of view on the legal basis of these elections. So we don't know. There is this commitment. The international community, the UN, the EU, are pressing the Libyan authorities to keep this election, but we don't know if the election will be held or not.
Is the split based on ethnic or religious purposes or political?
Well, Libya is in itself is split in different ethnic groups. There are even, and that represent different regions of the territory. So the differences start from the ethnic groups, but also then from the political support they have from outside.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Given the primary task of Operation IRINI is to enforce the arms embargo in the context of the Libyan civil war, in the remote case of successful normal elections in Libya and the formation of a normal government, will this actually automatically terminate Operation IRINI, or will it transform itself into more of a SAR operations, or what would be the future in case of a...
This is a very interesting question. I don't have the crystal ball, but I would say that IRINI cannot finish with the elections. After the election, a peaceful Libya has still to be maintained, still to be protected. So, in particular, as I said, there is the need to stop all illicit trafficking, weapons, oil, and migrants. So I think that Operation IRINI will have a mandate even after the elections, if the election will be held. Please.
You've been mentioning very different kinds of operations. Is involved in with migrants, so search and rescue, to illegal oil trade, and so on, weapons and so on. You have been also saying that IRINI is understaffed or underequipped. Rightly, you were saying that with one or two ships, you cannot be in north and south, east and west. My question is, in case there are different needs, who is setting the priorities? In other words, who is deciding what to do and what not to do? Is there, again, any political input given according to the EU agenda, or is just an, let's say, internal operational decision up to you and the senior staff?
Let's say that the First of all, the Political Security Committee, that is a committee of 27 ambassadors of member states, has the right to intervene on what IRINI is doing every single day, if there is something strange or something wrong. But normally, it's the operation commander, so it was myself, now my successor, that have to decide how to do things. We have a mandate, we have tasks, we have rules of engagement, and so military speaking, but also, say, for a certain extent, politically speaking, we can act as for the mandate. So I was in USA. I met a lot of representatives of Department of State, Department of Defense. This is, let's say, military politics, and I had no need to request for permissions. In any case, if there is something particular or some new situation that needs to be readdressed to the Political Security Committee, it's easy to ask them. They will convene. Maybe I can make the cooperation commander could bring the situation to the Political Security Committee, and the Political Security Committee could take a decision. It happens one time during the last 1 year now.
There are any questions
I
from?
think we have one question on Zoom.
Okay.
So if you would like to ask your question, go ahead. We got two maybe.
Could I ask a question?
Go ahead, Lee.
Thank you so much for taking our questions. So from my understanding, rudimentary understanding of this complex conflict in Libya, Turkey has been a major player in Libya since the end of the Gaddafi era and has criticized the Operation IRINI on numerous occasions and sometimes defied the embargo. I was wondering if there was something Operation IRINI, or by extension the EU, can do or perhaps has done to try and bridge this conflict of interest with Turkey.
Very interesting. Well, that is true. Turkey has had a lot of objection about IRINI, about the mandate, but not only Turkey. We could say even other Security Council members. In any case, I know that the Europe, in the person of Mr. Borrell, the High Representative, put pressure several times on Turkey to obtain the possibility that Turkey recognize IRINI, and in particular, that Turkey could allow IRINI to inspect the cargo that brings Turkey flags. At the moment, this pressure was unsuccessful, but we hope in the future the situation could change. Europe, as well as UN, has the power of sanctions, the power of name and shame, blame and shame, and so on. So there are a lot of different means to put pressure to a country in order to let them comply on the international law, because we have to stress the fact that if one ship does not allow, one country does not allow IRINI to inspect a vessel, it's against the UN Security Council resolution. So IRINI is not illegal. It's illegal these countries that do not allow the inspections.
Thank you.
I think that is it. Unless anyone else on Zoom, would you like to ask a question?
Sorry, one final question. I was just wondering, you were mentioning the difficulty in dealing with the migrants as you were dealing with a military approach, and the migrant situation kind of requires a humanitarian approach. Does this mean that there is the necessary involvement of other NGOs more is the word qualified, more focused on this issue? Is it a better idea to get them involved, or should it continue to be a military issue to
Well,
local areas?
as it happened for all the, let's say, Mediterranean countries, migration is an issue that has to be dealt by the proper organization. It could be Frontex, it could be Coast Guards, Italian Coast Guards, Maltese Coast Guard, Libyan Coast Guard, Tunisian Coast Guard, or whatever. The problem is the training and the means that the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy have at this moment. The training is returning to a very low level, as it was before 2015. They are not trained anymore on the human rights, gender issues, something like that, as it was during Sophia. Now there are third states that are training the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy, not Europe. And of course, there are different standards of training. About the NGO, they are doing their job. They are in the area, and as the international law says, if there is any ship that is in danger or any people at sea in danger of their life, every ship should, let's say, must save them. It could be military or civilian, NGOs or whatever. So sometimes people ask to me if IRINI could be involved in any migrants search and rescue activity. I would say, I don't know, but if it's necessary, we will save people at sea. IRINI will save people at sea, even if it's not in our mandate, but it's an obligation. It's a moral and a legal obligation.
Speaking of legal obligations, if I may, don't you think that Montego Bay law, I mean the UN United Nations law of the sea, convention of the on the sea, on the law of the seas, it should be changed or reformed?
Well, in the last 1 year, and let's say, first of all, that on the search and rescue activity, there are even other agreements, like, for example, the Hamburgo Convention that is dealing especially on the search and rescue. But in general terms, I could say that the Montego Bay Convention demonstrate its validity, in particular for that part that are constabulary law now. There is a part that is not recognized from member states, from all the international community, that should be revised, could be revised. But there is a part, and I think a very strong part that now is recognized as constabulary law that could be still maintained.
I'm saying that because although I do believe that the global migration crisis, it's not an Italian problem, it's not a Greek problem, it's not even a Turkish problem. I think that unless Brussels finds a new way to deal with this crisis, because we're still in this crisis right now, although numbers can change according to the flux of this migration in the Mediterranean, should be solved in Brussels with a new set of rules. I don't even mention Dublin because I'm almost nauseated by the way Dublin has been ricocheted from one country to another. But I do believe that it has to be reformed and profoundly. But don't you think that as we see it, migration, I mean, economic migration, I don't even mention the asylum seekers or those who have the proper right to apply for the asylum status, because it's almost a routine now to travel through the sub-Saharan countries, reach Libya, and then try to buy, as it's called, the jump from Libya to Sicily, or even to Calabria, or even to Sardinia sometimes, if I'm not mistaken.
No, no, it's true.
I think that this is almost a routine, and I understand that there is, as a very famous report of Amnesty International 2-3 years ago, attacked Sofia, attacked the European Union for complicity. But in the end, because we didn't reach the third level, the boots on the ground that you mentioned before, how can we responsible? Well, we know what's going on the beaches and in inland Libya, but we cannot be, the EU cannot be taken for responsible.
Well, I'm not here to defend Europe at all, but let me say that Europe is trying to do its best in Libya, even with some activities oriented on the sub-Saharan area, just to prevent this huge flow of people coming from the sub-Saharan area. The problem in Libya is it was in the last 11 years, the war, the civilian war. When there is an ungoverned state, the criminal organization could do whatever they want. And they are making a lot of profits with oil smuggling and armed trafficking, but in particular oil smuggling and human trafficking. Somebody said that I heard the last day in TV that now the human smuggling business is much bigger than the drug one. So that is incredible. That is incredible. So as far as I understood, there are a lot of initiatives from Europe, but also from member states to help, in particular Libya, to stop this flow. But also the important thing is to give Libya the possibility of its own security. They have to build their own security. They have to build their own, let's say, control on the territory. That now is not possible.
And according to you, the elections might change the horizon?
As far as understood, the Libyans want election. And as far as there will be a real recognized government, in my humble opinion, the government will have the power to act. Now the situation is quite fragile. There is a fog who is doing what? The parliament is Tobruk, the government is in Tripoli. The situation is quite foggy. With a proper government, a proper prime minister, a proper parliament, regularly elected, I think the situation could change.
Thank you.
It will take time, but
transition. Any other questions from Zoom participants? No? So I think we can close it here. So thank you very much for this lecture. We really appreciated it. And I hope to see you again on campus for another lecture. Thank you.
thank you.